Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good morning, Philippines. Good evening, Washington State. Good evening, California. This is Therese Zapanto Versosa of Empower Philippines.
This is Dr. Jude. Good evening, Seattle. We are kind of confused because we're trying to manage like 4 or 5 different timelines because some of our friends from Southeast Asia, aside from the Philippines, are watching.
Yes, yes.
Great episode. Gonna be busy. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's packed with a lot of things to learn today. So we will go right ahead before we introduce our amazing guest. So I'm honored to actually introduce her. So between Jude and I won. So I will go right. I'll start. Michelle Garcia Winner is a speech-language pathologist who specializes in the treatment of individuals with social cognitive challenges at the Social Thinking Center, her clinic in San Jose, California. She coined the term social thinking in the mid-1990s and developed a treatment framework that today includes information, vocabulary, curriculum, and practical strategies that can be easily used by parents like me, educators, therapists, and service providers. A prolific speaker and writer, Michelle presents internationally on social thinking and has authored more than 20 books on the teaching framework. We are honored to welcome Michelle Garcia Winner into our homes tonight, or in the homes of many Filipinos and all across the globe.
Singapore, India,
and Pakistan, and all over in Dubai. Please welcome Michelle Garcia Winner.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks you guys. So honored to be here. I was in Dubai a year ago and been in the Philippines many times, as well as Singapore.
Right.
Yeah, it's truly an honor. We on behalf of the Filipino people, we are very thankful that you made time for us and for the Filipinos. This is a rarity that someone of your expertise would be able to provide some guidance to the neediest of the special needs categories in the Philippines. So thank you. We have many listeners, including the specialists from pediatric specialists and speech and language therapists. Right. Absolutely. So Michelle, we would like to structure this to give you so we could give you as much floor opportunity as possible. Proceed at your own pace, and then maybe if time allows, we'll have some questions towards the end.
Oh, I hope time allows. Why don't you let me know what is our time?
Sure. Well, we can proceed for as long. We can proceed for as long as you want.
Oh yes.
All right.
We will give you, Skylar would soon give you the control so you can present some slides.
Yeah. So Michelle will present something. She has something for everyone. And I think our son Skylar is directing it upstairs in his bedroom.
Okay.
It's just us. This is just a family thing.
You know what? I'm totally down for that. I get it.
There you go. Okay.
Put on my, let's see, if you guys can see this.
Yes.
We can.
See the full slides?
Yes, we can see it all. We can see it very well.
Okay, so the intention here, as we discussed, there's a plan for you guys to ask me some questions.
Yeah.
And as much speaking as I've been doing for the last 23 years or so all over the world, I know that the audience has all different needs. I personally work with kids as young as 4 and across the age span. Right now, I'm only working with mature adults or adults, and I happen to work with mature adults. So I'm working with a lot of 40, 50, and 60-year-olds who have subtle but significant challenges, most of whom have never received a diagnosis, which is absolutely fascinating. And to kind of see where they are and how we continue to help. I think for family members, and in fact, all interventionists out there, it's really important to realize that social learning never stops in any of us. But to give you guys a sense, I know some of you guys are probably familiar with what I do to some extent, and others of you are very new to this. And we are a different way to think about what many think of as social skills. And so as I give this, I just kind of want to give you some background. We are a methodology. I started in the field of autism in the late 1970s. And at that time, between the 70s and into the through the 80s, I only worked really with folks who what we knew autism to be then, which was what we now call classic autism, or ASD level 3 in the DSM 5 or ICD-10. And then I ended up working in hospitals with folks with head injury and strokes and learning a lot about executive functioning and higher order thinking, as my initial clients were fascinating to me. And we saw we could help them come out of institutions where they were put because mothers were blamed for causing their children's autism. Can you imagine how horrible? And so I worked with the kids who'd kind of grown up in institutions, and virtually all of them had some level of intellectual learning challenge as well as autism. And then Temple Grandin introduced us really to the idea that bright people also had some social learning challenges, but could be very bright, and ended up working in hospitals and learning about just generally what happens to people when they lose abilities due to head injury and stroke. And then because my children were born in the 90s, I ended up working in schools to be on the school schedule. And that's where I came across Asperger's syndrome when we started to recognize it in the DSM-4. And that was about 1995 that I got involved. But I started to see folks, my students, many of whom were very bright, some of whom were diagnosed, some were getting just diagnosed with autism or Asperger's syndrome in the high school. But I found that they were very resistant. Those who had some level of self-awareness, social awareness, awareness that people had thoughts and feelings about them, they were really, really opposed to services. And so I had to really rethink what I was doing, because I was behaviorally trained in compassionate behaviorism. And that's worked very effectively with my significantly, what we call significantly challenged social communicators, or our autism spectrum level 3 or classically autistic. But what I found was compassionate behaviorism was not effective for my students who felt like they understood people had thoughts about them. In fact, they were really angry about this in my high school. And so I had to rethink how I taught. And what I realized was, you know, in going into anthropology and starting to read more broadly and think about this issue deeper, I realized that our students, the students I was working with who were really refusing services, didn't need to be told what to do. They needed to think about how to understand themselves in the world and how to understand others and all these hidden rules. So that entered me into thinking about, and I really didn't have at that time any plan to become a speaker or develop a methodology. I was just meeting my students' needs. But over time, as I started sharing with the public what I was learning, at a time we were all just learning about Asperger's syndrome, which now in some ways has gone away in the DSM, but a lot of people still really relate to the Asperger's, you know, side of the autism spectrum. In that time of developing this methodology, what's important is that it's not for everybody. It's really for kids as young as 4 and across the lifespan. And it's about people who can think and talk about their own and others' thoughts and feelings. And some of our little ones are learning how to think and talk about others' thoughts and feelings. Even some of my adults who at one level have college degrees really haven't thought a lot about others' thoughts and feelings, but they're learning to think metacognitively. And that's what I'm going to focus this talk on today, is just kind of really making sure we know the difference between behavioral treatment and teaching social competencies. And so I'll try to go through this information fairly quickly to get to, I know, your questions. I realize questions out there, you guys have a range of challenge. In social thinking, I started thinking about the spectrum of social cognition, which is more than the spectrum of autism. The spectrum of autism, I will say, is here. And then we have a lot of people, like many kids I work with, people say, oh, they're not autistic anymore, but the kids have serious mental health challenges, ADHD. And I'm like, what does this all mean? Let's look away from the diagnostic label and really think about just humans. Who are these individuals? What is it we can help them with? And why would we, when we remove a service because we say they're not autistic, was that really a good idea? Because these kids still have some compelling issues. What we talk about is subtle but significant. And the reason why the issues are compelling is because the more subtle we see your social problem, the more harshly we judge you, because social ultimately is a judgment. And even our folks with autism and related diagnosis, they judge as well. It's not just us neurotypicals judging them. They are equally judgmental of us and each other. So language, receptive and expressive language is important, as we're going to talk about metacognition and really thinking in language or using language to think. But here's a lot of different diagnostic languages, labels. So
hey, Michelle, I hate to interrupt you. From our end, we're looking at your slides from a slide presenter's view. Was that your intent, or?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yes,
Oh,
of course. Just want to make sure.
Are you seeing me?
I'm seeing you. And
yeah,
then
we can see you and your slides.
and
so
your
we're good.
slide as a slide presenter view, but this is good.
Okay, I'm wondering what other presenter view would there be?
We can see your next.
Oh, you can see the next. Oh, I get what you're saying. You can see the next one as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't bother me.
Oh, that's fascinating. You know, since this is going to be short, if you guys can all just tolerate seeing what I'm talking about and seeing what's coming up next, because for me to try to figure out the mirror.
Right. Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. So you guys are seeing, it's a bummer for me because I can't see you at all. So I'm just staring at my screen.
Oh, really? Okay, that's right. Okay, we're here. We're just listening. Yes.
We're with you.
I can imagine that. I can share in that imagination. I'm often in my film studio these days talking to the world with staring at a camera. So
no, we're here. We're here. Imagine is that we're here.
I got it. Okay, so here's what's important is a lot of people, there is a tendency around the world to think that you can only have a compelling social problem if you have autism. But it's compelling social issues show up in so many different forms, and the treatment is not necessarily uniquely different based on a label. The treatment to me is very much based on your level of social understanding, regardless of the label. So parents out there and diagnosticians, we may diagnose one kid ADHD and somebody else is diagnosing them autism spectrum. The same is happening in attachment disorder in schools in the United States. I can speak to the fact we have an eligibility category of emotionally disturbed. There's a lot of different diagnostic DSMs inside of that. And so what's really important to hear is we are not treating, in using our social thinking methodology, the treatment is not based on diagnostic labels. It is based on your ability to attend and interpret and respond to really interpret social information. You'll see narcissism down there. You know, the DSM is about diagnosing behavioral characteristics. It does not seek to understand how the brain processes information to create those behaviors. So if a person is born to a brain that doesn't help them think about others' points of view, it's really easy to call them narcissistic. But if we think more deeply about, does this person really understand someone else's point of view, perspective? Very often, Pam and I are working with adults who are coming in with diagnosis of narcissism, borderline personality. And when we get to know that person as a social thinker, we're like, they're even telling us, I just don't think this way. I don't think through other people's minds. And so I'm like, okay, let's just think broadly about diagnostic labels. And if you are a parent of a kid who's not autistic, it doesn't mean that your child would get a treatment that is wholly different from those who are at ASD level 1, or if you're not ADHD, we would still be working with your kid perhaps like we work with ADHD. So that may be confusing to folks because we're so used to globally silo-based treatment. Get a diagnosis and think your treatment relates to the diagnosis rather than social cognition. What's fascinating about social cognition is that as much as anthropologists and other people have studied it quite a bit, we have no specialists who are actually trained in social cognition. So speech pathologists were trained that there's an area called social pragmatics, but there's no counselors, psychologists, unless you are a social cognitively trained psychologist. There's none of us out there, and yet social is such a cornerstone to our life in the world. So I kind of took on by accident developing a specialty in this. So we think about the social world, and the social world is anytime, not just that you're around people, anytime you're thinking about people. If you're sitting at home by yourself watching media, whether it's the news, a movie, or you're on social media, you are thinking about people. You are inside of the social world. So now you have to think about, well, when aren't you inside of the social world? And certainly there are times, but the social world is around us more than we realize. It's also inside of our curriculum more than we realize. Schools all over the world think social is on the playground. And I'm like, no, social is inside of history, inside of social studies, inside of science labs. Social is the reason that we read literature, to understand many people's minds and experiences and emotions. And so teachers are taught social is how you behave in a class. And I'm like, no, how you interpret understanding the world is your social mind. How you apply that knowledge relates to your behavior, but it also relates to your ability to write a paper, summarize a paragraph. The social mind is incredibly powerful, but we give it little credit. And so it's really important that we understand it. So what are social competencies and how do they differ from social skills? Let me go to this comparison. When treatment, and so many treatments in the United States and other parts of the world are focused on teach a kid what they should do socially and reward them doing it. And that's what we tend to call a social skills approach. Identify a skill, teach the skill, get them to do the skill, reinforce the skill, take data on the skill, and then say, great, they're learning social skills. And so we call that you're teaching the kid to behave in that moment, whatever you want in that moment. But one of the things that we know from behavioral literature is that it's constantly struggling to show generalization, because behaviors are behaviors in that time and place. But the only way to generalize that behavior is to figure out how do you use it somewhere else. And that's more than the behavior. That's trying to figure out, who is this people? Who are these people? What is the situation? And so teaching social behaviors does not explicitly teach someone how to problem solve, how to become socially competent. Social competencies are figuring things out. Social behaviors focus on behave. So we could get frustrated with someone because they're not behaving, but when you scratch the surface and look deeper, you may find that they actually didn't understand the situation. So they didn't know they were doing necessarily something so outrageously wrong. Let me give you my classic example. I have so many, but this is one that sings to everybody, is the third grader who was getting up and hitting kids in class when he raised his hand, the teacher didn't call on him, someone else gave the answer, the kid went over and hit the kid who gave the answer. So I was called in because that's a massive behavior problem. The kid is misbehaving. It's bad, and they need him to stop that behavior. So they were trying behavior plans, but the behavior plans weren't working because they were trying to eliminate a behavior. So I went in and was called in. And so the first question I asked the kid is, why are you hitting these kids when the teacher doesn't call on you? And the kid's answer was, because they are stealing my thoughts. And it's like, okay, so we need to teach you how thinking works in this class. And one of the challenges, people will say, well, you can't take great data on thinking. But that's the thing about language is the behavior of thought, that we speak intentionally based on what we're thinking. And this kid was able to tell me he is hitting them because they are stealing his thoughts. Now we have some pretty solid data about how this kid thinks. This aligns with cognitive behavioral therapy if you are trained as a counselor. But now we have to help this kid think differently. And that's where cognitive behavioral therapy therapists out there in the counseling world are not trained, which is, how do you get all this scaffolded information to be able to understand how the social world works? And that's what social thinking is all about. So the first aspect of being socially competent is to just make sense of the world around you and to problem solve what's happening within it. since I'm talking to a global audience, you guys travel a lot, very often, or, you know, you're familiar with US culture from watching a lot of our shows, and we travel in our minds around the world. One of the, whether we're sitting in our living room or actually experiencing it, one of the fascinating things you'll see in your own mind is that when you are around people, or even if you're watching something on TV, you're trying to make sense of it first. If you're watching it and it doesn't make sense, it's either frustrating you and you change the channel, or you keep watching it to try to make sense. Who are these people? What is the situation? Why are they acting like this? And so the social mind from the beginning, from our birth, is designed to help us make sense of what's going on around us. It's the meaning maker. As we age up from infancy, our brain is kind of creating these roadmaps or blueprints of how does this world work? Oh, I see how classrooms work. Classrooms work different than the lunchroom, and that works different than the playground. And you start mapping all this stuff onto your big world knowledge map, or your social knowledge map, or what we call a blueprint. And now when you experience the same but different, you go to a different school in a different classroom, you can see that your blueprint is largely holding up. And so what we find with kids with social learning challenges is they don't have a very strong blueprint of how the world works, that they may have been focusing on details and not been noticing some of these broader points of view. And it is fascinating. I still love working with the folks I work with because I keep getting to learn from them. But when I'm working right now with a 66-year-old, and how much he doesn't understand about how the world works and how much conflict that's created in his life, and now he's starting to see it a little bit differently. That's what we mean by you have to understand something in order to respond to it. One of the concerns I have in treatment is that we rush to try to get somebody to do something differently, even though they don't understand what's happening around them. That we have to figure out how they're understanding before we can expect them to respond in a sense. So let me just show you this clip. Some of you may have seen it before, but just think about, can you make sense of what's going on here? So AmeriQuest has since gone out of business, which is why I can show these to you, because they are available on YouTube, but they have 6 or 7 of these. And we love these videos because they don't have language. So they don't give you any language-based cues as to what's really going on. It's all about you being a social observer, a social detective, to try to make sense of what's going on around you, reading all these nonverbal cues. A nonverbal cue is more than a gesture or facial expression. It's figuring it all out. What's this? Who is this man? Why is he in there? What's his plan? What's the cat up to? How is she going to respond? I've used that as an assessment clip. I actually used it with my 66-year-old man when I first met him, and he didn't pull it together. He went at the very end of it. He just he said something about, okay, how's this woman going to handle the fact that he just killed the cat? And so it was like, wow, okay, that's really interesting. This man has a master's degree. He works in a high level in the medical world. At least he did till he decided to stop working because he had too much hostilities in the work environment, because he was struggling to read the social situations that were going on. So we begin with interpreting to learn to problem solve. As you interpret, your problem solving, what is going on? We do not go into situations memorizing. Like, you cannot memorize what's happening in a situation because humans are largely unpredictable. Even if we have different roles, we may say and do things we can't always predict. So to be social, just to make sure everyone really thinks about this, most people around the world think about social as play, social is hanging out, social is friendship. That's part of it. It's so much more. Social is making sense of what's going on so that we can react and respond. Even if we're by ourselves watching TV, we're forming judgments about what's going on. We have opinions. And then face to face, we then adapt our behavior based in a situation. If we are part of it, as we interpret what's going on, we have to figure out, what are we going to do in this situation? Do I stay quiet? For many kids, just staying quiet is really effective. So social is not always having a verbal response. A lot of times being social is to understand that no response is the right response right now. And it's all based on your goals. How do you want to be perceived, and how do you understand the needs of others? So you may have your own goal, like in a classroom, you want to show people your teacher that you've got the right idea for what she's teaching, but you can't just consider your own goal. You have to consider the goals of others, and social is always more than yourself. So for example, if your goal, and this is totally fair, you want to let someone know you're frustrated. I think we've all experienced that. But you want to let them know you're frustrated without making them so angry that they are now really mad at you. So how do you handle your frustration? And it's okay to let someone know you're not happy, but how do you do it in a way that serves you well? And that's part of self-advocacy and all these other elements. So in treatment, what we're really about is we finally, like Pam and I are always trying to go, okay, we've put out this enormous set of information. How do we help it make sense to people? So if you can think about it this way, treatment always starts with making sure people understand how the social world works first, before we help them figure out how to work in the social world. And as I mentioned my adults, I'm going to keep mentioning them because I wish you could see these sessions. So many of my adults, they look completely like typical people. One of them is a 5th grade teacher, but he really understands the world of everything he commands, his classroom. His role is to lead the class. But as soon as he's not in a leading role, he actually doesn't understand how to relate to people. So he often, if he's not in charge, he just walks away from people. He doesn't actually know how to manage a world in which he is not defining what is happening in front of him. So it's been fascinating getting all these folks' comments about, I had no idea how people do this. And then I talk to this man every Monday or Tuesday. This week he said, just thinking about all this stuff makes me realize so much more. I just didn't know. So we want people to back up. I was explaining to my clients this week, in our treatment, it's not about how do we move you forward faster, faster, faster. It's actually how do we move you backwards to find out what gaps you have in understanding the world so we can help you navigate to regulate in that world a little bit better. I'm going to just mention really quickly, you guys have an article you can get on this. This is called our social competency model, and it starts at the bottom that we're attending. You have to attend to social information before you can interpret it. And then when you interpret it, you problem solve what you're going to do to make sense of it. And if you're in a face-to-face situation, you then figure out, okay, now what am I supposed to do with that? And when you're looking at interpreting, there's so many different parts of it. And I won't go really even reading this list. It's just important that family members and interventionists know we have to spend more time on on interpreting. Almost all social goals are written at a behavioral place. This is what a person should do. We don't work enough. It's my bias. It's my feeling. It's actually more than, it is how the brain works. If you read social processing information and social processing theory and research, the brain has to attend and interpret before it can respond. So we have to do more to keep teaching how to be aware of what's going on around you. And so our competency model then extends to, as you're responding, we call that social cognitive self-regulation. And it involves social skills, language, it involves all different contexts. But what's really important here is it involves understanding what's going on around you and understanding how people are evaluating you in that space. That's that social evaluation piece. This is where it gets very tricky for some families, a number of families with kids on the autism spectrum, because some of our clients are very limited in understanding people have thoughts and feelings about them. And others are very aware people have thoughts and feelings about them, but they're not quite sure what it is that they're doing that's leading to, when they don't get positive evaluations, but they get negative, they don't know how to repair that because they can't figure out what they're doing that may be causing people to perceive them differently than they wanted to. And so what we're seeing from the research is those who are aware people have thoughts and feelings about them, but there's a gap between how they feel, how they think they're doing and how everyone else thinks they're doing. When that gap is there, what we're seeing, and this is how I make sense of the research, because the researchers aren't actually asking all the questions in the same way I would ask them. But how I make sense of it is the more aware you are of how people evaluate you, the more anxious you are, the more depressed you are. So we see that. And then what they're saying is, oh, the higher level of the autism spectrum is more stressed and depressed. And I think it has a lot to do with, this is the group that is aware that people have thoughts and feelings. Mm-hmm. Whereas you get to ASD level 2 and 3, that is not a great skill set for them. That can be really frustrating for parents, though, when kids are not evaluating how people think and feel because they're pretty unaware of themselves socially. And so obviously that's going to make the sophistication of what they can learn harder. Not every, obviously people on the autism spectrum or the spectrum of social cognition don't all have the same outcomes. It's based on their core learning abilities and how we can help them improve compared to themselves. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up here so we can get to some questions. To sum this up, we really want to look at social attention, and people will say, well, how do you get to social attention if a kid's not naturally attentive? One of the things I found early on was when you explain with language to kids what's happening, and this is the vocabulary we've created, is your body in the group? What's the group plan? Think with your eyes, make smart guesses. What's expected, what's unexpected in this situation. Language can push us to attend to specific things that our brain might not naturally pull us to. One of the things we know about folks with autism spectrum is their brain doesn't push them to socially attend in the same way as people who are considered neurotypical. And so that doesn't mean it's a black or white, you can attend or can't attend. It means that we may have to help you see what your brain didn't actually see. And language is the tool to get you there. And then from there, once we get you attending, now we're working with you on figuring out what's happening. And then we go from problem solve to respond. So we have, if you go to our website, and hopefully if you're not familiar with us, we have really user-friendly materials. I know I sound very technical here, but we've translated this into some pretty practical stuff. You can read about our competency model, and in fact, the extended competency models article that you'll see that shows you how anxiety, depression, sensory overwhelm, and even screen time can cut back on your access to your social cognition or your social abilities. Mm-hmm. So this is just, again, as I just talked to you about the language, as we use language, we use it to think about our own and others' thoughts and feelings. One of the tricky things out there is not everyone thinks in language inside of their head, but a lot of us do. And everyone who's sophisticated, which is most typical people socially, they have some process of evaluation inside their head that's not completely unconscious, where they could be thinking about, should I say this to this person? What's going on here? And so that's what we want to come more alive with our kids, to be more evaluative inside of and our adults, not just kids, more evaluative, slow down a little bit, open up that gap between stimulus and response. Like, where is that moment you can actually think about what's going on? It goes pretty fast in our brain, but it is there to capture. So to be socially competent is to consider for one mind, your own mind, to consider many minds at once. And The journey towards competency is what we're always working on. So for example, if a kid like I've had this student who says, teach me how to make a friend, what we do in social thinking is not go, okay, let's, here, be a friend, go say hi to that person. It's more complicated than that. We're going to unpack it. It's not good enough to be nice. In fact, if you see 13-year-old boys who are friends, they don't look very nice to each other. They look like they're all making fun of each other. So going in and smiling and saying hi may not be your ticket to friendship. You have to kind of figure out peer culture depending on the kid. And in fact, some of our kids who look too nice get taken advantage of. So friendship's not all about being nice, it's figuring it out. And so with our How Does the Social World Work, years ago, I started creating a way to explain to kids, hey, we call this all friendship, but there's many different levels. And just saying hi to somebody does not in any way mean that they're your friend. Somebody that you happen to talk to because they're next to you, that's an acquaintance, but that's not really a friend either. They're just an acquaintance. We become friends when we start making plans to be together, even if it's like, hey, what are you doing can I play with you during recess? And now that puts you into a place where we're spending time organizing together. So with that, we're really working on, our goal is to help you navigate to regulate better in the social world, but it's a journey to get there and not a sprint. So if you have a kid who has just a tremendous behavior problem that is not to be tolerated and you need to stop it now, you would use a behavior plan, but you would not think that behavior plan is going to carry you into the next level of social competencies and figuring it out. And 25 years into this, I have had so many kids who come to our clinic and they grew up on behavior plans, and we start teaching them how to attend, interpret, problem solve, to respond. And they'll say to us, oh my God, I have to relearn everything I learned. Because what they learned was to memorize, and what we're teaching them is to problem solve. So that is the goal of, that involves executive functions and self-regulation, just to connect the dots, that these are not all freestanding. These are all part of the same bag of tricks here. And so you can go back and read the slides. I gave you guys the PowerPoint to see, but I want to kind of wrap up that the social mind uses as many executive functions as we do to complete homework assignments. People usually think executive functioning is about doing and turning in assignment, but friendship and relationships are about organizing and planning and intentionally trying to be with each other. If you don't show intention to be with another person, then you are not considered a friend or in a relationship. And that's one of the hardships right now with the pandemic, is everything that's happening socially has to be super intentional, because you're not running into your friends in school when you're in online communication. So here's a list of executive functioning, and then developing self-regulation is all about what we just talked about. Ultimately, self-regulation is for you to attend, interpret, problem solve, and respond. When a kid is yelling, hey, stop, stop it, we could say, no, you're not allowed to do that behavior. And we could say, but only right here in this classroom. If you're out at a football game and you're yelling, hey, stop it, that might be the perfect thing to yell. So you can't teach you're not allowed to do a behavior. You can only teach when and where that behavior is unexpected versus when it's expected. We have a ton of free information on our website. We have free webinars on all of these topics, as well as 20 other free webinars. I'm a big believer in get people information to start unpacking this, rather than think. Our business model is not you must buy something to learn. Our business model is let's make information accessible and understandable. And obviously we provide other things like curriculum and all of that. So we have different ages from 4 to 7 and 8 to 10. And we've got, if you've heard of Superflex, we have free articles and lots of information. We have teens, tweens information that we go all the way up to a book for adults. There is so much. And I keep learning, and I'm 25 years into this.
Wow.
So,
okay, can you see us now?
I can.
Oh, wow. You know, for our fellow Filipino audience, and of course, I'm Filipino, I'm Filipino American, but I would just like to thank you for this, because what you have done, this social thinking concept, to me as a parent, it is so practical, realistic, authentic. You say it how it's supposed to be. Like well, for those of you, why probably you're wondering why we have Michelle Garcia Winner. I have been practicing, we have been teaching social thinking with Zach, who has autism. He's in the spectrum. He's 16 now. And we've probably been doing this for about 7 or 8 years. And every November, I actually attend your conference, and they're in Tacoma Convention Center. And I don't know if you remember that, but every year I try to say hello to you. And I have all of this book stacked on my side. You can't see it right now, but all my library, half of my library has social thinking. Like, I could really work for social thinking. But this is the reason why we are sharing Michelle Garcia Winner and the concept of social thinking, because it does work. One of the things that she would always, I always remember this, it's true. Everyone, sometimes we do social fake. It is, how do you show that you're really interested? But, you know, it's not hypocrisy. I'm not talking about that, but it's kind of the things that I have to teach Zach sometimes. Like when he is attending Zoom meeting, and I have to teach him, Michelle, like, Zach, you can actually mute it, and it's okay. You know, he was just so focused on being nice, but sometimes you have to mute it and kind of like pretend that you're really listening if I'm sharing you something that's such a concept, that you can understand what that teacher is telling you. So those things. So anyway, so I just
jump in here and say that I talk about this a lot with students, clients of all ages, but you know, doing the social fake is based on your goal. If your goal is to have a relationship, a marriage, like many of you guys, a friendship,
right?
You know, it's not that the information your partner has for you is always fascinating, right? Like what's fascinating to me, as I share it with my partner, is fascinating to me. My partner will be interested possibly at some level and possibly not interested, but because it's so interesting to me, there's this need to kind of show me you're interested.
Right.
So what I work with my clients on is, what is more valuable, the moment of you having to have something fascinating, or the long-term relationship you're building? If the goal is a relationship, you let go of every moment has to be fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're aware that the other person has needs to and desires to share.
Yeah, great concept. You know, Michelle, I'm speaking as a parent, not as a physician. We were ingrained on teaching what our children, especially whether they belong to the autism spectrum disorder or not, to do something or not to do something. In essence, we're teaching them how to behave. I want, if you can you discuss a little bit more on how focusing on teaching social behaviors, just teaching social behaviors does not teach an individual how to do problem solving. Mm-hmm. Instead, it just teaches them how to behave and not to behave. And some of those, and a lot of the social competency model breakdown that you've mentioned requires a lot more just beyond knowing what not to do and what to do. Could you?
Yeah. Well, so because I'm making a very big deal about interpretation, and you know, I recently was working with a group of speech pathologists. This is just not something we're talking a lot about in anybody's field, how important it is to interpret, including autism. Like, we often give a very narrow thing, like attend to their facial expression or their gestures, and it's like, no, pull it back. Like, attend to what's happening. What is the situation? Who are the people? So let me give you an example. Many of you guys who are working with kids who are anxious, we want them to not be so anxious. But what is causing anxiety is perhaps not understanding what's happening around them. So I worked with a man who actually sold a company to Google, very wealthy man. He was sent by a counseling center because he was just not picking up on, they weren't breaking it down enough in terms of what he should do. So he comes to see me and he's really retreated, like many of our teenagers, and our other kid. So his body is like, you talk to him and his body's pulled back and he's kind of looking down, but he's telling me that he really wants people to talk to him at a party. Right? And this is, I've had so many like this, you know, and I have teenagers like this and 11-year-olds. Why won't kids play with me? And their bodies are turned around and they're standing over here and they're like, they should play with me. And then sometimes people at school go, yeah, you're right, they should play with you. And it's like, sure, yes, they should play with you, but every signal you're giving is you don't want to be with them. It's a great travesty of social anxiety, right? It's the challenge is when you feel anxiety, it pulls you out of the social scene rather than puts you in it. So you communicate to everyone else you don't want to be there, but you expect everybody to want to be with you, and humans are constantly interpreting. So here's this man, sold the company to Google. He comes to me, he's telling me that his goal, he's invited to these big parties because he's very wealthy, but he can't talk to people. So he only wanted to learn how to talk to people, but I'm watching him. So I finally say to him, I know this isn't going to sound like it makes a lot of sense, but I would like you to do homework where you have to go and sit, like when Starbucks was open, sit in Starbucks, watch the people, try to figure out who are they? Do you think they're partner, child, parent, friends? Do you think someone's coming in to be by himself, just wants a drink? Who's coming to try to talk to somebody else? Go figure it out. So he spent, very bright man, about a month passes, he's doing these observations. He goes, this is not my thing. I'm not a people person, but I have been doing it. And then he goes, and what's amazing is I had no idea. People look at each other. I didn't know people smiled when they greeted. I didn't know how people stood with each other in line. He goes, you have to know the rules of the game to play the game.
Right.
And I know that quote because I asked him to write it down, send it to me, and I put in one of my talks. But isn't that amazing?
It is.
Like, think about how much we expect. And we see this over and over and over again. I worked with a 13-year-old. Now he's in university. He's now 19 or 20. But I started with him late diagnosis right at the end of his 13th birthday. And he started working with me saying, okay, I'm not interested in being with anyone because everyone in my school is a jerk. Everyone. So don't even try to convince me they're not jerks. So he goes, the only reason I will work with you is if you teach me how to tolerate jerks. Okay, so his goal is not to be with people. I can't go teach him to go talk to people. He's already told me he doesn't want that. So my approach was, I can only help you tolerate jerks if I know what jerks look like. Go observe the jerks and tell me what they're doing. Where do they hang out? How do they communicate with each other? And then he started noticing all of these things, and he started writing them down because I made them as homework assignments. It was amazing. And one of the things that, we saw was he actually had never known to observe. To observe the social world is something you and I take for granted. Even when we're parents of kids with autism, we still think that they must be doing some of this stuff, and then they're just misbehaving. A behavior is a response to what you think is going on in your mind. And if your mind isn't understanding it, then you're not going to respond. This kid thought everybody was a jerk because he thought of himself as a really well-mannered, nice person. He didn't know how to think through other people's minds. Right. And that's called spontaneous theory of mind. And the research right now is still really weak on that, but we know it's a thing and it's really important. How do you think through someone? How do you think about what someone's thinking about you? Why you think about what you want them to think about you? Why you want to figure out what they're thinking too?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it goes beyond our understanding of metacognition. Michelle, I want to talk about that social competency model that you created. That you put out. I think it's amazing because many of us don't realize, for us neurotypical individuals, it's not a conscious thought for us, right? Yeah. Well, the social attention, and then the interpretation, and then the problem solving and response. It's not a conscious model, but you've unpacked it.
Yeah.
And so my question is, how does one start to teach? Maybe even just social attention and interpretation. You've talked about having your clients observe the environment. Maybe
Right.
I'm thinking that's social attention.
Mhm.
How do you get them into the interpretation portion of it?
Okay, so it depends on, it's not a one way. The first thing we know for sure, joint attention, the ability to join in attention, to watch somebody's eyes and see what they're thinking about, is the doorway to all of this. So if you don't have the ability to consistently be able to know how to reference somebody else's thoughts with your eyes, I won't get into how to, with the vision impaired and all of that, because that's a thing too. But that's what we know for sure on the research. Everyone agrees. If you don't have joint attention, you can't go further. So let's assume you do have joint attention. Now, let me say that we describe a lot of kids with high functioning autism who don't have joint attention.
Mhm.
They have language, but they're not attending. So a lot of our treatment needs to back up. And like a lot of professionals out there really do joint attention with preschoolers, but it doesn't dawn on them to work on this with high schoolers. In my experience, the brain can keep learning across. It will never be fantastic at it, but it will be more tuned in. So let's assume you have the ability to understand philosophically. You can attend to other people in a structured setting. In a spontaneous setting, you may not be attending to it. Right? So you do have the ability, if I give you a task, tell me what that person's looking at, what are they thinking about? The kid could do it. But as soon as people take that structure away, the kid's not naturally gravitating towards paying attention to other people. So that's where we're going to start in a couple of different places. One may be, we're going to get you started in a really basic place, which is, let's figure out where is the group? Where are people's bodies? Where is a group, and what is that group doing? So we bring in language like body in the group, like we think you're a group if your body's in the group, and what is the plan of that group? Now that sounds really simple. That's incredibly complicated. If your brain's not figuring that out naturally, the body in the group is one thing. And I remember to this day coming up with that language with a group of fourth graders who were 10 years old. And one of them was gifted, and his body was sitting way outside of the group. And he's like, I can hear everything you say. Just keep teaching. I'm in the group. And so I did this lesson with Play-Doh about showing him your body's not in the group. And then all of a sudden, this kid started talking about whose bodies weren't in the group. It never dawned on him before that your body needed to be in a group to be part of the group. Just like my very brilliant man who sold a company to Google, didn't dawn on him when you're standing over by yourself. People don't see you as being part of this party. Where is your body?
Right,
Now,
right.
what is the plan? Are people, who's the teacher, you know, who's in charge, who's supposed to be talking? And that can get very complicated. So we begin there. Another place you can begin is just with, depending on the kid and their age, the older the kid, as we're getting up to our 10-year-olds and beyond, we actually want to give them structure so they actually can navigate a little bit more. So we have something called, I showed you the friendship pyramid. We have something called the 4 steps of communication. We think with our minds who we want to be with. We move our bodies towards them to show when we want to be with them. We use our eyes to figure out what's happening in the moment. Then we use our language to relate. So what we do by that is we say, hey, it's not just talking. How many of you parents out there have kids that won't stop talking and they think they're communicating and we're like, be quiet. And so it's communication. That's why I broke that down, because I was like, we were all taught communication is talking. And it's like, no, communication is figuring out how to understand what to say when and when to listen. So that's what we do. We use visual frameworks. We're actually just about to launch a new product of 26 different frameworks we've developed over the years to give everybody more structure to different parts of the social world. If you're interested in any of this,
Yes.
sign up for our newsletter on our website, just socialthinking.com/join, because we are always every month giving new articles, new videos, but this is a very cool product that will give you a shortcut to learning about a lot of our frameworks.
Beautiful.
Wow,
Socialthinking.com/join.
Okay. You know, Michelle, what you have just shared with us in the past, the whole hour and just a few minutes ago, it is so practical because, for example, you want to go back, let's do the acquaintance versus friendship. Zachary, said to me, Mom, I miss my friends at his middle school. Well, he technically only goes there for social skills and speech, because I homeschool him for his academic. He attends the homeschool community once a week. And thank God for social thinking, because you just shared to parents how you have to teach that, wait a minute, just because he's says hello to you doesn't mean that he is a friend. And I have to say it's called an acquaintance, because you see him every day. And it's the same thing when we had Zachary, when we went to your clinic for the informal dynamic assessment and consultation. And we just asked Zachary, because his impeccable memory, before this coffee conversation, we said, Zach, when did we see Michelle Garcia Winner again? And his face lit up. Oh, I saw Dr. Pamela Crook and Michelle Garcia Winner, February of 2000. What's it, 18?
17,
that was like 2 years
18.
ago. And I'm like, anyway, so I remember you or Pam says, well, Zach, what about if we keep saying hi to everyone in the hallway? Well, that will look like weird, you know? So we're talking about how you just meet people doesn't mean that they are your friend. So would you like to share a little bit more about how to really kind of guide? It's hard for them just because they know, yeah.
It is hard. You know, the reason I came up with the pyramid is I had a group of teenagers and they had a lot of questions about friendship. So I was like, what is their question? Like one kid, they just kept saying, teach me how to make a friend. Mm. And I thought, man, there's just so much more to this. So I unpacked it with the pyramid and then I brought it into the group. And I remember the kid going through the different levels on the pyramid. And then one of the girls in the group says, oh my gosh, I thought I had all these friends, but all I have are acquaintances. And at one level, that's really sad. But on another level, it helps her to understand where she is, because if she thinks all these people are friends, but they're acquaintances, this is going to lead to a lot of anxiety, because her expectation for what these people would do and their expectation, like, why is she, like, I don't really know you. So why do you keep treating me like we're best friends? Is important. And so one of the things you had mentioned, I really appreciated you saying this, as a person who ended up in the center of the world of social, one of the things that was incredibly frustrating to me was when I went to work in systems, schools, different kids, how everybody put rose-colored glasses on social. Oh, he's such a lovely kid. He's wonderful. He's great. And that's, of course, true for most of our kids. But that doesn't mean he's a good learner of social information. And they're just saying, one day a kid came to see me, and this kid was profoundly challenged in social learning. Really one of the weaker kids that I'd seen for quite a while. The teacher had written a report that said, if every kid in my class was like this child, I would be very happy. And I thought, how confusing to family members, because the family was thinking the kid's ability was super high because nobody was talking about how the social brain was working for this kid. They were just kind of covering up their own anxiety for this child was hard to understand how to relate to. And that really, all these experiences led me to go, I own my own company, so I don't have to say what I don't believe. Yes. Sometimes systems force you to say things you don't believe, and it's not helpful to families because families don't know what true is. And it was incredibly frustrating. Like, nobody did anything wrong having a child who's a different learner. But let's understand their learning strengths and weaknesses. And let's understand where a kid is socially. I had a parent say to me, and her child was, what I would call I've created my own scale with my team of different levels of social functioning that goes across this. It's actually a free article on our website. It's called the Social Communication Profile. So this child's level 1, very, very weak, no joint attention. He's a teenager. And the mom said, the only thing I want is for my child to have a friend. Is that too much to ask? And I literally said, unfortunately, it is. Your child is lovely. He's friendly. He does he tries to do what we want him to do, but he actually cannot interpret how someone else thinks and feels. And that's a requirement of actual friendship.
Yeah.
And so these are, you know, really hard things to say, but to just make the parent feel better by saying, you're right, he should have a friend, sets them parents up for frustration too. So I saw a lot of that, and I thought, this is so not cool.
Right.
Because once these kids graduate from a high school, it's all family. There is no country other than Scandinavia in the world that will support you well
That's true.
post high school. And parents are, you know, we'll sometimes give parents a bill of lies about how a kid is doing because the kid behaves.
That's right.
Yeah.
He doesn't cause a problem. So everyone says he's great. And then the parent that graduates, and all of a sudden the adult world doesn't welcome them. And now the parents have no team. And I can't stand that.
Yeah.
You know, Michelle, you speak the truth.
Yes.
I as a parent, you speak. I'll share a story. For a decade or so, we've been told by the counselors in school, the speech therapists in school, the special ed teachers, Zach is a wonderful kid. Oh, he's so adorable. He's so nice. He's so meek. And we went with it for a long time, up until one day when he was out biking. And then he calls me on his cell phone and said, Dad, I see some of my Lake Ridge friends, he says. And I said, really? Where? By the lake. He says,
Don't say the school.
don't say the school. Therese says, don't say the school. Okay, I see some of my school friends. And said, where? By the lake. And I joined them. And I said, all right, why don't you join them and I'll go and hang out by the side. And so I go by the side of the lake.
Right.
And I see him approach the friends. They're in a group. And he's trying to do everything that we taught him, you know, the body facing forward, eyes on. And then the group just turns to him and kind of ignores him. And then they keep on talking. And then when they started cussing, my son backs away and goes to me. This was all me from 100 yards away observing.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, he asks me, you know, Dad, what do you think? Why didn't they talk to me? And then that's when I realized that they're not really your friends. You may be meek, but it doesn't make you socially not inept in interacting. And so until we took the bull by the horns and started to do our own teaching through social thinking, did Zach learn how to increase his social competencies.
Yeah, and I think, you know, these are so painful. And, you know, I deal with so many painful stories, but what keeps me in the game is I am inspired by the learning that I do see. We just have to be patient enough to allow it to be a journey and not a sprint. If anyone says they can make things change on a dime, just don't believe them. This is a journey. It's based on neurology. It's not based on poor parenting. It's not based on spoiling. It's, you know, of course, there's sometimes that some of that doesn't help, but it's neurology. That's why we get kids diagnosed. It's not because of parenting. It's neurology. It's how our brain works. Yeah. And to not be shamed by that, but to allow, who is this person? We enjoy that. Nobody enjoys their typical kid all the time, and no one's going to enjoy their atypical kid all the time. So it's not about somebody being a perfect person. It's really about just helping them go on this learning journey. And what's really important for families is that journey doesn't end at 18 years old. I am so inspired by my 25-year-olds and my 35-year-olds and my 45-year-olds. That's where the best learning is, because they stop denying they have these challenges and they are more aware of taking information on. So the early years are great too, all the way through, but just don't think that if your kid is a kid who has enough ability to start to think about thinking, realize their journey of learning is across their own life, their whole life, just like yours is. Mm-hmm. You know, we all become wiser over time.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
I could be a student again. I think I have a lot to learn.
Well, if you read social thinking and all the books that you have created, it is for everyone. Just like what you had said at the beginning, Michelle, that social learning is from the time that, you know, you knew understanding up until the day you die, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, what you and I are doing. I like it how you simplify strategies for parents like us and say, well, when you watch people, how they behave, that's already one part where parents can be speech therapists for their child. And I think you mentioned, I like that story that you had shared with us during the conference, where if you are going to, like, it's already late evening and you go to grocery, you have to go to the car, or maybe going to the gym, and you feel like, you know, it's scary. What would you do? You can be nice, you know, and this is the reason why I like social thinking, because you're telling us the truth. And although some of it can be painful, but that's what we really need. So then we can help Zach, at least for me, how to expect the right expectations.
Right.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, our kids are who they are. And you know, I'll kind of wrap up by saying the work that I started creating, I realized, you know, strategies for my students. And you know, we have a framework that's just called the social emotional chain reaction. What we do affects how other people feel and think, which affects how they react and respond, which affects how we feel and think, right? Like connecting all these dots helped the kids. But very quickly in my early years, I started to realize that I needed to help the interventionists, parents and professionals too, because no one's trained in this. And so sometimes the hardest people to teach are the professionals, because there's this tendency to think, how hard can social be?
Right.
Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that actually is even the more prominent in Asia. There's a number of places in Asia which are like, just tell me what to do. We've got to have efficiency here. Let's get this happening as traveling around the world. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we got to back up and really think about that. So from the interventionist point of view, what do we have to learn? How do we see this kid more than a, you know, if we only see a kid as a diagnostic label, you already have a problem.
Yeah.
The kid is a person with a personality. They're going to grow. Who they were at 8 is not going to be who they are at 16. Don't get stuck. Like I have a family that really struggled because they had a really friendly 8-year-old and a super anxious 16-year-old. And they kept saying, what happened to you? And it's like, well, this is the journey of life, right? Yeah. So we also need to just keep teaching ourselves, whether we're parents, interventionists. I don't stop learning. I'm constantly there. This is a complicated world, this social world. Arguably more complicated than any of the hard sciences, because it's got so many moving parts. So come with us on the journey. That's what we're here for, is to try to unpack it and explain it. We will be as honest as we know to be. And one of the things I think that makes our work even more powerful is we are working with people across a lifespan. So we know what it looks like to age and to understand where you are and how you continue to learn.
Yeah. Michelle, speaking of honesty, could you be honest with us and let us know if you have time for, maybe I'll pack 2 questions.
Yeah, we want to be respectful of your time, Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me just check the clock for a minute. I can do 2 questions. I'm actually,
okay.
In the pandemic, my father, who's 96, moved in with us. And
God bless you.
so
okay,
we'll be respectful.
He needs me to put him to bed.
Oh, goodness. So the question is, I think I've read this question. It's probably about perspective taking. The question is, if I have to interact with, by Dan Alvarado, if I have to interact with somebody over a situation, should I approach that person based on how he feels, or I base my reaction on how I feel? So maybe more about perspective taking.
Okay. In our frameworks packet, or if any of you have the Inside Out book that I wrote about social academic, it starts with a problem solving sheet. This is a social problem solving dilemma. That's the book. It's my first book I wrote, but it was the one where I started all of this around social. It's called Inside Out. I wish the title wasn't What Makes a Person with Social Cognitive Deficits Tick, because I wouldn't use that language today. I would say with social learning challenges. Because we don't want to think about people as having deficits, but that's 20 years ago. But at the beginning of that, there's a social problem solving sheet. So your question's great, because social is a balance. It's of 2 people's points of view. And so if I'm stressed out, I can think about what's stressing me, but I also have to think about how are they going to, how do I say it in a way that they can hear it without making them mad? Right? And so now you have to problem solve. What is the problem? So I've been doing a lot of this work with my clients lately, and here's what's hard. What's the problem that you have that you think you're solving for? Like, just nuanced difference on how the problem is creates us different choices. But in that problem solving template, it's like, what is the problem? And my newest framework is, whose problem is it? Because a lot of my kids kept blaming their problems on everyone else. So until you agree that it's your problem, you actually don't have a problem to solve. So whose problem is it? And then what do they think the problem is as well? Do they agree? Now you have choices to solve it. And when I give choices, I always give one of the choices is the bad choice. And there's always a bad choice. And the bad choice is often the choice you make to do nothing to solve your problem because you don't know how to handle it. Versus when is a good choice is trying to figure out, you would talk to somebody, but then when you go down in the problem solving model, it's like, okay, now you're realizing you need to talk to them. What are you going to say to them? When are you going to do it? How are you going to manage your anxiety with doing it? So it's just all part of this bigger process. So there's problem solving on the social competency model that we do all the time. Here's simple problem solving. You're walking by somebody on a street. How do you move around them so you don't bump into them, right? Our brain does that automatically. We call that problem solving. Now I really have a dilemma problem solving. And that's when we need to slow down and really start to think about many minds in one mind to figure out how to meet our own goals. Do I want to say this to you and just make you so mad you want to just throw me out of the room? Or do I want to let you know I have a problem and have you stick around to help me solve it?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you, Michelle.
So Michelle, we don't have any more questions, but just a comment. I would like to thank you for all the things that you're doing, especially today, ladies and gentlemen. Michelle is just donating her time. And from the bottom of my heart, as a parent, as a nurse, from the Empower Philippines, whoever is listening to Michelle, I just want to thank you because your methodology, everything is helping parents find hope, because it's so simple, it's so realistic, it's so authentic. And just like what you said, you don't have to have a book. If you have a book or curriculum, much better. But boy, your wealth of information in YouTube, social media, and I receive emails every so often. And actually, I will miss your physical face-to-face conference in Tacoma Center, but it is what it is. But I just want to thank you because your social thinking allows us to teach our children that you can't just be academically competent, because if you don't know how to read the social mind of others, it'll be hard for them to kind of hire you, so.
Well, you do just have to be able to read the room, right?
Yes.
So college degrees do not guarantee employment, and how to figure all of that piece out. But please avail yourself to our website. People are shocked by how much free information we have. Hundreds of articles, lots of webinars. We actually put up a free stuff portal of lessons just for the pandemic so that people can come, teachers, speech pathologists, and pull down some ideas on how to teach. We have some of our books we have read aloud there because people wanted permission to read aloud and film them, and we can't allow that for intellectual property. So we just took our books that we sell and read them aloud to make some available. So we're doing our best we can. We're all in this together, this darn pandemic, and
thank you, Michelle. So your website is socialthinking.com. Any other place that they could reach you at?
How can we reach you?
Any other way that they could reach you at?
Yeah, they can just email info@socialthinking.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. You're not a thought leader, you're a thought pioneer. Thank you. And say hi to Pam for us.
I will.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. Zach says hello to you.
Oh, great. And I'll tell Pam too. And thanks to all you guys out there. Pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to listen and think about this.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So folks, well, that was wonderful. I'd like to, for those of you who have children in the spectrum, or those who might need some assessment, a very good friend of mine, Dr. Mimi.
You want to say hello to them?
Dr. Mimi Bautista.
Hi,
she's a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, and she's darn good at it. She also owns, she has a practice in San Fernando and Angeles City in Pampanga. I can't divulge her phone over the internet, but you could look her up. She has a Jesu Child Development Center, which is a one-stop shop. This is in Barangay Lara City of San Fernando, Pampanga, and they do everything: OT, PT, SLP, and all that. We also wanted to say hi to the Philippine Association of Speech Pathologists, and Jesu has a special school recognized by the Department of Education.
Maraming salamat for tuning in.
Right. Okay.
And also this San Fernando Pampanga Elementary teachers and therapists, everyone who had said they are tuning in.
Lumel Aquino, I think, is in Jesu. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yes. We just want to thank you for showing up and watching Michelle Garcia Winner. It's just a glimpse of what she can share with us. Marami siyang ginawa for how to break down social thinking. And I cannot recommend it enough kasi as a parent, it is so simple, practical that I can teach it to Zach. You need a speech therapist, go ahead, but at least when you are at home or wherever, kung kasama mo yung anak mo sa car, or maybe you're in the church, you can now teach your child, let's observe what's happening, in the mass, or, well, if it's COVID, what about in the grocery? Or maybe even just go to YouTube, just like what Michelle had done, how to interpret. That is, I think, where we are now. You can attend, like attention, you have the attention, but how do you interpret? The interpretation, meaning what's happening? What do you think she's going to do? Why do you think she's crying, the little boy?
Yeah, so I think that's the social interpretation.
Yeah, you have to interpret, because when you're able to interpret
you can
what's
solve.
happening, then you can solve the situation or maybe whatever problem it is, and then you can respond.
Yeah.
So napaka-simple niya, but all of these books that we have here, you don't have to have them, of course, kasi kung nasa Pilipinas po kayo, but go to YouTube. I cannot
go to her website.
Yes, go to her website, socialthinking.com, and then hopefully you can also get her emails every week, which is info@socialthinking.com.
Socialthinking.com.
Right.
Yeah.
So what else?
Well, that's it. I think the focus of teaching, especially for those of you who have special needs, students or children, has always been about behavior. We always focus on behavior, but it's really beyond that. Behavior doesn't teach a child to be socially competent. Teaching a child or a patient what to do and what not to do doesn't teach that child to be successful in life, because they don't get the executive function of the brain working. So teaching them social competencies would be one great way of elevating your method of teaching so that you can make and set up that child for success in the future.
Yeah, I like how my professor, Ma'am Olga Tulabot, who is actually my co-author, hopefully, if I have it published, my thesis.
I'll do that.
Okay. So,
Teresa has a thesis that she wrote about using social thinking.
When I took my master's.
Her master's in special ed. It's about social thinking. Social thinking as a framework, particularly behavioral social mapping, right? Did I say that right?
Yes, right. It's
behavioral
right there.
social mapping.
Yeah, so using social mapping.
So, we want to mention this because it's become an integral portion of our training and our education for Zach. Social behavioral mapping.
Social behavioral mapping is just, simply put it, it's may call them pusha. So if I would teach Zach, if he is always wearing the same shirt every night for sleeping, and is that expected or unexpected? Those two words, Michelle Garcia Winner had coined them under social thinking. So it's kind of like, is it relevant or not relevant, or is it appropriate or not appropriate? But
we use the word
they use the word expected versus unexpected, because they had to put it under social thinking terminology. And so my thesis is the effects of social behavior mapping intervention on unexpected behaviors of a 14-year-old boy with autism. I just shared that with everyone because I have to tell you, social thinking works. And second, when I proposed this topic to my professor, Dr. Olga Tulabot, and she listened to when I gave a talk to therapists and teachers and families in San Fernando Elementary School, she said, oh, I get it. So social thinking, it is the theory behind why you would do a social skill. It does make sense. Because, you know, when we take our child to a speech therapist or a social special education teacher, we always have those words, social skills. So how do I teach my child social skills? Skills is action. It's a deed. It's something you do, right? It's a social behavior. But then how, before the behavior, you have to have kind of like a reasoning. Why would I do that? Why did that person do that? Why? So that's the meaning maker. That's a social mind, which unfortunately in our schools, it's a way of life. The reality of life is that they don't teach social thinking in schools because it is supposed to be natural in our brains, but not our children who have autism, not our children who were born with that kind of neurology. Unfortunately, that is why this thing is working, because we need to know. It's like a book, you have to read it. And so a lot of all the concepts I have to really advise everyone, there is hope if you will just pour yourself into this, and you don't even have to buy them, which is great, you know?
So yeah, that was beautiful. Again, you know, it's not just teaching a child the behavior. So this is why I am recommending Jesu, because they have, they're evidence-based, and they have very competent speech therapists, OTs, and SPED teachers.
And they do social thinking. You know, Dr. Mimi is using social thinking.
We've gone there and kind of socialized or just talked about social thinking as well. Right?
Yes, that's right. So we hope that this coffee conversation had been another help and tool for families, for parents, for teachers. This is a way to share our life journey with you, the educators that had made an impact in my life as a parent, as a nurse, a special education teacher, and just as a regular person. And it is the same thing for Jude. So we share what we have, because in this earthly life, you know, it's a limited time. So we hope that whatever you have learned today, you take it to heart, review it, rewind it, and go to those website, socialthinking.com. And this is not just for today, you know, for all of those future coffee conversations, please always find time to freshen our minds, because we need that, just not just for our soul, but also for our children, especially this concept like right now.
Okay, so our next episode will be November 13, Friday. We will have Tim Staples.
Who's Tim Staples?
Well, you'll find out. We'll show some advertisements. So we want to say goodbye to our folks.
Okay.
Goodbye, and thank you, Empowerers. We will see you soon, November 13. Watch out. Look for our website for Tim Staples.
God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.